Dear, dear participants, I will start in English just with some announcements for today. The bus will be next to the entrance at 2 o'clock if you like to go to the airport. If you need any assistance for the taxis, you should go to the information desk. And after the session at the 1 o'clock, we have a snack just where the coffee break before. Okay, that's small announcements. If you have any questions, the organizers is in your disposal. And this moment I will switch to Latvian. And
good afternoon, participants of the conclusion session. I'm truly honored to be here with you in such a great number, and I will introduce you with the participants of the last panel. The first is Aija Barča, and she is State Secretary of the Ministry of Welfare, and she has great knowledge about these issues. Then Ms. Cabrala will give her speech, and she works in Inclusion DG. The third speaker is going to be Mr. Benifei. He's one of the youngest members of European Parliament, and he has become a vice president for 2 committees already. And the last, but not the least, is Jānis Jaluros, who is he's a member of EDF and represents the Association of Deaf People in Greece. He works in this association for a long period of time and works very closely with it. And I pass the floor to Aija Barča.
Dear participants of the high-level meeting, I welcome you on behalf of the Employment and Social Affairs Commission of the Latvian Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I would like to say thank you to the colleagues for the debates during the working sessions, which have been constructive and meaningful. Thank you to colleagues who successfully moderated these sessions devoted to inclusive and sustainable education and employment of persons with disabilities, as well as the rights of these persons to full-bodied lives. Currently, we have approached the closing part of this event, and I would like to touch upon various social and economic problems that have to be solved to strengthen the context of the education and employment of persons with disabilities. All topics covered by this conference are of equal importance. Creation of jobs, better lives for people by ensuring a smart, sustainable and integrated growth is the goal of the European Employment Strategy and Strategy Europe 2020. The skills that promote inclusion in the labor market ensure full participation of people in the economic, social and cultural life. The structural changes in the European labor market as well as changes in the society hinder this process. At the same time, we should not forget about the protection of the most vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities and their inclusion in the labor market. As to the employment, Europe faces unprecedented challenges the aging of the society that coincides with stark changes, with significant changes in the labor markets related to the demand for specific technological skills and gradual disappearance of traditional jobs. The new labor market conditions are quite difficult to adapt if we speak about the most vulnerable groups of people. If we manage to solve the employment issues responsibly, we could make sure that the most vulnerable groups become a successful part of the labor market, thus reducing the poverty and exclusion risks, and also to promote the entrepreneurship. It is very important to ensure that the growth is inclusive and sustainable. Thus, we could reduce the risk of uncertainty in the future. The Great Recession proved that the lack of one or both of these elements may significantly affect individuals and the whole economies, and even undermine the basis of our societies and cause social upheavals. One of the most vulnerable groups, if we speak about social exclusion and unemployment, are people with disabilities. European Union Disability Strategy for 2015-2020 has set the goal of ensuring that people with disability can participate in all everyday activities in the whole of Europe. To implement this goal, we have to ensure environment, services and resources availability. Thus, it is necessary to integrate various EU and member state policies in uniform platforms that protect the interests of vulnerable groups. We also have to consider that the environment and services availability for people with disabilities are of great importance for the growth of the economy as such. Support to the sector that invests in goods and services intended for persons with disabilities would stimulate innovations and allow to create new jobs. Irrespective of the unstable economic recovery, the unemployment is still very high in Europe. Though in the last year we have seen some progress with regards to the achievement of the Europe 2020 employment goals, the situation in case of poverty goals is not as good as in the former case. To ensure the employment for the most vulnerable groups requires the review of the overall perspective on the situation of these groups. Currently, we have certain concerns with regards to the elimination of equality with regards to these groups that can result in various grave circumstances. For example, social exclusion that will cost a lot to the Europe in the future. One of the challenges and one of the cornerstones of the European success is the discussion of various problems to promote the inclusion of the most vulnerable groups in the labor markets. The current situation with regards to the persons with disabilities is very worrying. It is very important to involve all the stakeholders to promote the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Here I'm speaking about effective cooperation between various state authorities and social partners. Also, good results can be achieved if we cooperate with civil society, including various target groups and targeted measures. Adequate, effective and sustainable social protection systems and well-functioning employment authorities are of significance to ensure that our labor markets are inclusive, that the poverty is eliminated, that social activity increases, and investments are made in the human capital. These investments are important for the European countries to maintain their competitiveness in the changing world, thus ensuring decent conditions for their people in the long term. Currently, approximately 80 million of people in the age group from 15 to 64 have a functional disabilities or other types of disabilities. Quite often these disabilities prevent them from becoming active members of the educational system and of the labor market and the society as such. Actually, in all areas of our lives, people with disabilities face difficulties in comparison to people without any disabilities. This is confirmed by the statistical data. The gap between the employment levels between the people with disabilities and without disabilities is approximately 20%. But in some member states, this gap exceeds even 30%. Though in Latvia, this gap is comparatively smaller than the EU average of 20%. The study results show that persons with disabilities and chronic conditions face significant burdens if they want to become an active part of the labor markets. To solve these challenges this year, we have planned to introduce a new program in Latvia for the improvement of the employment of persons with mental disabilities. I'm sure that inclusion will always result in added value. It is of great importance, though employment and social policies mostly fall within the remit of the national policies. There is huge potential of sharing our experiences and knowledge, especially with regard to the integration of social inclusion elements in their sustainable development plans. Inclusive labor markets is just one of the issues that we should discuss as to this. We have to pay special attention to the quality jobs, which is related to sustainable integration of persons with disabilities. As to structural reforms, I have to indicate that though they are of great significance to ensure medium and long-term economic growth, their social consequences in the short term can and have been negative. Our experience shows that an efficient social protection network can allow for the necessary structural reforms. It is very important to set the priorities and to decide which tasks can even hinder long-term development. At the same time, we have to assess how our budget policies will affect the European growth, because actions of one member state can have a certain effect on the situation of the other states. To use the EU funding efficiently, we have to ensure an efficient allocation of these resources to specific sectors that will allow us to efficiently invest in various infrastructure objects and the development of various resources. We have to monitor the use of these resources efficiently to ensure the prospects of future growth, at the same time remembering that education, infrastructure and investment contribute to the attractiveness of business environments. We have been discussing the inclusive employment in the interparliamentary meeting of the chairpersons of the Employment and Social Affairs committees of various national parliaments that took place on the 22nd and 23rd of February here in Riga. At the same time, I would like to underline that we have 2 million vacancies in the European Union, and these vacancies are not occupied mostly because our people lack the necessary skills. We have to strengthen our education systems and the capacity of employment agencies. We have to reform and strengthen vocational training, including the cooperation with employers, to ensure that our curricula meets the requirements of the labor markets. Educated people are the greatest values that our nations have. The capacity improvement and the creation of integrated programs for persons with disabilities are one of the cornerstones of inclusive and sustainable education. One of the most important aspects, if we speak about the support to the persons with disabilities, I believe this aspect is the understanding, the awareness in the society about the needs and requirements of various people. We have for a long time relied on the medical considerations in such cases. Maybe this is not the most appropriate approach to the solution of disability-related challenges. The society has to understand that disability is not a disease, it's just the way we live. And we, the society, would have to create such conditions, such circumstances for these people so that they feel safe, comfortable, and would not feel different at any moment. Social approach is a solution that allows these people to grow as personalities, strengthen their self-awareness, protect their rights, and improve the possibility of living full-bodied lives that would benefit the whole of the society. Thank you to all of you for being here, for taking care of our society, for taking care of the future of various groups of our society. Thank you for listening to me, and I would like to wish you all success in your future activities. Thank you.
Liels paldies, Bar.
Thank you, Ms. Bacha. I must admit, she really touched upon all 3 pillars that we have talked about during this conference. And I would like to emphasize this shift from the medical model to social model that was stressed throughout the speeches of various speakers, as well as how to, through the cooperation of social services, we can successfully implement our reforms. Thank you, Ms. Barcha, for the conclusion of all these discussions. Thank you. Together we will make it. Now the floor is given to Ms. Cabrala. As we have heard previously, it has been getting very varied reviews that this issue has been brought back into the agenda, but I think that within DG Justice these problems will be solved, and especially if we talk about the rights of people with disabilities. And I think all of us would like to hear the view or the vision of the Director General. So I'm giving the floor to Mrs. Cabral.
Thank you. Before I will share with you briefly what we are reflecting on for the review of the disability strategy, I would like to share with you what I take from this conference. In addition to a wealth of ideas and best practices, I take a number of concepts that will certainly influence the way we think ahead. And this can be summarized in 5 words, and those are data, hope, together, listen, and normalizing. Data. We heard here the confirmation that the situation is not optimal. This day, we heard also that we need data to inform better policy making. And we also heard we need to make our data better. And this is certainly something that we will take forward in the review of the strategy. Hope. The situation is difficult, but there are a number of best practices out there. There are solutions for problems. It is possible to learn with each other to do better. Together, we have listened here, actions being taken at local level, at global level, European level, by private companies, by public bodies. Involvement of all actors at national level, political actors, government, Parliament. We have here in the same table the representative of the SHEMA and also the European Parliament. We also have Mr. MEP Marek Plura that made a big voyage just to be here and to participate in discussions, and I would like to thank you personally for that. Also, this is an issue that concerns us all, and I'm sure that the representative of the European Parliament will tell you more about this. But this month we will have a discussion in plenary on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The Commission will also make a statement on this. And so together with this conference organized by the Latvian presidency, May is certainly a month where disability is very high on the agenda. I wish every single month could be May. Let's try to do it like that. Now listen to persons with disability, listen to their representatives, listen to all those active on the ground. Or as the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe said, have the courage to be confronted to our prejudices. And finally, normalizing persons with disabilities, as the representative from British Telecom said. I have to say, I say this often, that ideally the unit that I lead on the rights of persons with disability shouldn't be needed. The rights of persons with disability should just become the normal thing, and everyone would consider them in any given policy. Unfortunately, it's not yet the case. Well, good for me that I have a job, but but we still need to be very active. I will also take this occasion to reply to a question from Italy that I didn't manage to do during the conference, and it concerns the transfer of this unit from the Directorate General Justice to the Directorate General for Employment. I would like to reassure you that no change in Commission organization would put into question the commitment that we made when ratifying the UN Convention. So our approach will always be an all-encompassing human rights-based approach towards disability. Now to talk about the actions that we are engaged in and that we would like to adopt soon, and future actions that we are considering. I've heard a number of you mention accessibility and how important it is, and all of you, if not most of you, if not all, know that we have been working in the services of the Commission for a long time on a European Accessibility Act. The intention would be to use the internal market potential to improve the availability in the market of better and cheaper accessible products, that is, mainstream products that are accessible to the largest share of the population possible. This is being discussed at political level in the Commission, and I hope we will have news for you soon. We are also working, and we're working together with a number of member states and civil society on the development of the disability card that MEP Marek Plura mentioned not long ago. The aim of this card would be to introduce a system where member states would recognize disability status granted in other member states, and this card, which would say that you have a disability and that is accepted across the EU would give you access to a number of discounts, being in culture or transport or sports, and would allow you to be treated as a national when you travel to another member state. So we were working hard on this, on these two projects, and hope that we will be able to give you some news about them soon. What we are also doing is engaged in the review of the disability strategy, as I mentioned before. We are planning to do a careful stock-taking of progress that has been achieved since 2010. We want to have a broad consultation of all stakeholders, but in particular persons with disability and their representative organization. We will use to the fullest extent possible the recommendations that will come out from the UN committee. It's always good to have an external body to point us where progress needs to be made, and we will take that into account. And we intend to publish the review of the strategy early next year. Hopefully it will be a product that will propose action at European level where it is most needed and where it adds value. And I would like to thank you again for this very interesting and fruitful conference.
Paldies, Cabrals kundzei.
Thank you, Ms. Cabral. Thank you for sharing her views and opinions. I think mostly we knew them before as well. And now we know the time schedule in more detail. Once more, I would like to say thank you. I would like that all of us would take part in this implementation. Now the floor is being given to Mr. Benifei. He is a representative of European Parliament. He will tell us about what will be the support for realization of these innovations. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you, dear excellencies, dear guests. I would like to particularly thank the Latvian presidency for this remarkable initiative. I very much appreciate the efforts of the Latvian presidency to insert this meeting in the framework of multiple initiatives on disability issues. It was time for the European Union to mainstream this topic, running, as they say, their extra mile. Hoping this commitment will be renovated by the next presidencies, I'm very honored to have the chance to take the floor today as Vice President of the Disability Intergroup of the European Parliament, and I also want to thank my, as was said by the Commission representative, my colleague and also Vice President of the group, Marek Plura, who is here, and it's a very committed colleague on the topics. Result of this high-level meeting constitute an important step forward towards a sincere and effective implementation of the UN Convention on Rights of the People with Disabilities, already mentioned by the representative of the Commission, in all member states, in order to ensure all people with disabilities a full enjoyment of their fundamental rights and high levels of dignity alongside with equal participation in their community's life. I think it's always important to focus particularly on mainstream education and employment, discussing human rights model-based solutions targeted at promoting inclusive and successful systems across the EU. The only way to guarantee and promote an inclusive society, which is a strong EU value indeed. It is not necessary at this stage to raise attention to the enormous additional obstacles and risks people with disabilities and children and women among them in particular face nowadays, because I know that colleagues and guests here already know the controversial, often incoherent and fragmented reality across EU countries and regions, where policies suffer from lack of funding in the best scenario, and also from an inadequate and ignorant approach in the worst cases. So also the disability card that has been mentioned is a very important project that we are supporting and pushing for. I would like to focus for a moment on the CRPD, as the convention represents the milestone for the paradigm shift we were looking for. This leads me to take in consideration, first of all, the list of issues to the European Union published by the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities on April the 17th as an intermediate step before the release of the recommendations in September, and in particular the points related to Articles 24 and 27 of the Convention. To summarize, we are asked to provide proof of concrete steps taken to promote, protect and ensure the rights of people with disabilities, respectively in the fields of education and employment, for example, by focusing on eventual specific targets within the Europe 2020 strategy and by demonstrating an adequate level of invested EU resources, structural funds and European Social Fund. At the same time, developing new methods of data collection and of involvement of people with disabilities representatives in policy making. Even if not concluded, this stage of the process must be considered as a strong invitation to multiply our efforts and our commitment to look for smarter and innovative policies that can complement national and local strategies and enhance EU funds potential across the EU. Some tools at our disposal have been already highlighted also in the conference. Midterm revision of the European Disability Strategy, call for the unlock of a CRPD fully compliant Equal Treatment Directive, call for strategies of e-inclusion also in the framework of the European Strategy for a Digital Single Market, just launched by the Commission, inclusive vocational training schemes, as already mentioned from the colleague from the Parliament. The European semester will be a fundamental testing ground to check at the European level if the paradigm shift towards a human rights approach has been effectively understood and pursued. We need to ask for more balanced priorities in line with the goal of reducing poverty and social exclusion, also in the framework of the review of the Europe 2020 strategy. The same goal needs to be pursued in the framework of the EFSI funds. An European plan for growth must in fact address the challenge of achieving economic recovery with promoting social inclusion, solidarity and cohesion. No one should be left behind. Also, the Youth Guarantee embedded in the Youth Employment Initiative could be used in a more efficient way for inclusion of young people with disabilities. On this, the Member States' commitment is crucial. It's upon us now to maintain our stance and work for the necessary changes. Dear guests, let me conclude by underlining that we as members of the European Parliament in the Disability Intergroup will not quit our responsibility to act as watchdog in the next years. We will, au contraire, carry on with our fight to raise awareness on disability-related issues and promote equal rights for all. The necessary fiscal consolidation and structural reforms cannot be obtained in the expense of adequate spending for these policies. The founding fathers of the European Union, when they outlined the future integration, they proposed a union of solidarity built on the ruins of the Second World War. We must not forget this aspiration. We must continue working for a real inclusive European Union. Thank you.
Liels paldies Benifei kungam un teikt, ka valdība.
Thank you to Mr. Benifei. So the representatives of governments see that the Parliament is following what the Member States has done during the semester, and this places a greater responsibility on us how we do things, what we do, and whether we achieve our goals. And the same refers to the Youth Guarantee, because currently the Member States are actively relying on it, and possibly the aspect related to the young people with disabilities in relation to the youth guarantees could bring some new approaches to Latvia. I'm really happy to announce that in June we will have the Digital Assembly in Latvia, in Riga, and digital issues will be considered there, including the social inclusion aspects, and our ministry will address the audiences with a statement or deliver a presentation on the application or use of new technologies for the care of persons with special needs. So thank you to Mr. Benefei for his statement. And now I would like to give the floor to the final speaker, Mr. Yaluras, who will offer us the views of the persons with disabilities organizations of what has been going on here and what his or their opinions are about what the national parliaments, European parliaments, or the government has stated with regards to the needs of the persons with disabilities, if this is what they really need. The floor goes to you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Minister of Welfare of Latvia and dear guests and colleagues, first of all, EDF would like to thank the organizers, the Latvian Presidency of the EU and the European Commission for convening this high-level meeting on disability as part of the Latvian Presidency of the EU. We are all here, and that is what is important, to hear one another. This meeting comes at a very important time when almost every member state of the EU has ratified the convention, and the EU itself is undergoing its review by the UN Committee this year. We are here in Riga, where one can consider that Riga is a very important city, and it's the voice of persons with disability. We can see that we work all together in the EU level among with the people with disability to improve our situation. We have heard during this conference of the progress which the Convention is stimulating in realizing the rights of 80 million Europeans with disabilities, children, parents, women among them. So 80 million people, this is a big number, and it keeps getting bigger. EDF requested from the European Commission to create a DG for disability because of that reason. And it's the same in Greece, where I come from, that we could have a special directorate for disability. On the other hand, as we all know, the economic crisis has slowed all this progress that has been made down. Children and adults with disabilities in Europe have been disproportionately affected by austerity measures. In the last 8 years, it's true that adults with disabilities have been affected the most. We all live in this planet, and we are here and we participate in these conferences in order to make the best we can, in order to respect the fact that we are all different. We are all humans, and we have to respect that we are different, even though we are humans. We, as EDF, are here to prove that we are not just words. We are active in a European level, in national level, with our members, our organization members fighting for our rights. 80 million persons with disability give us the strength and the will to go on. And it's a big responsibility for us. The fact that ministers have come together in these 2 days shows us that in this time of change and crisis, the commitments made to the rights of persons with disabilities, to the signing and ratifying of the CRPD, have not been forgotten. And I have to congratulate again the Latvian presidency for a great job these 2 days in this conference. What we need now is action to make these rights a reality. In all education and employment policies and programs, the rights of children and adults with disabilities should be addressed. In all actions to tackle unemployment, persons with disabilities need to be included. In all surveys of the labor market, we need to include persons with disabilities. In the spirit of the Convention, and in line with Article 4.3 of the Convention, in all policy matters, persons with disabilities should be meaningfully involved. We, as organizations of persons with disability, we stand ready to collaborate with you in the next steps of implementing and monitoring the Convention in Europe. We, as EDF, we never thought ourselves as your opponents. We didn't come here to stand opposite you, but by you. We want to work together to make the world a better place, not only for people with disabilities, but for everyone, for all the millions of people in this world. We say, nothing about us without us. That's not just a slogan. That's not just a motto. It's a way of living. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of building. We look forward to participate in regular meetings in ministerial level in the coming years as the EU and member states work together to implement the UN Convention in the EU. And we all have to remember that in the 3rd of September, we will have the concluding observation of the UN committee, and this will give us more to do. We want to work, we want to give back to the society, and EDF is here and stands before you to say that it will work for a better world, not just for us, but for everyone, for a better society, for a better Europe. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a good success to everyone's work and a good and safe return to your homes. Thank you very much.
Liels paldies,
Thank you to Mr. Yaluros. for his very warm and welcoming statement, because I had an impression that what was done has been done correctly, moving in the right direction, and this is what we have to continue. All politicians and all officials that work with these issues, and not only with these issues, I believe all people that work, for example, with the development of new products that build roads or houses, they have to have the convention on their tables. As Ms. Cabral rightly indicated, only horizontal implementation of the convention will provide the actual results. It cannot be considered separately from the rest of the life. If we speak about accessibility, we don't have to think just about special technologies. We have to think about general technologies that would make our lives and the lives of people with disabilities easier. Thank you again. Thank you to the panelists. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Uldis Augulis, the Minister of Welfare of the Republic of Latvia, for the closing statement.
We have spent a lot of time in very intensive discussions about questions and issues that deal with the future and everyday life of people with disabilities. There's a question for me and for you as well. What does a person with disabilities expect from us, and what do their relatives expect from us, from politicians, NGOs, service providers, and the rest of the society? Maybe nothing too much, just the chance to live the same life and to be as independent as all of we are. However, in real life, it seems to be a lot. Our work, our task is to help, and it's a very responsible task. Ladies and gentlemen, the implementation of this convention has created many conditions. For example, the level has been raised, but on the second hand, the convention has provided clear notion what must be done. When we have reassessed the previous experiences and he set out the future goals, and now that we have acquired the force to battle them, we can go home with a new determination. We have a clear vision on what the main things are in the European Disability Strategy for the next 5 years. Our priorities can be found in the conclusions of disability of this presidency. We need to pay attention to these issues on national agenda to fulfill this convention fully. The conclusions provide information that we need interdisciplinary solutions and such measures that would correspond to the goals of Strategy 2020. We need an effective tools to make legislation equal for everyone, and we need to take in consideration the principle of equality to promote Europe free of barriers for everyone. We need to work together with the civic society to use the new technologies we have and to use the structure founding to improve the social inclusion of people with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to everyone that has proven their worth in these discussions. I hope that this conference has been something very useful and educative and will provide a new impulse to find solutions for equal rights for people with disabilities. I'm very happy that we in Europe are trending to the institutionalization, and we try to find a new knowledge that will help us in making our policies. On the road of implementation of the Convention, there are many challenges. A poor view on the challenges, for example, funding, lack of funding. It is very important that we all have the knowledge and determination to continue this work. I truly hope that when we meet after a while, we will come to a conclusion that the situation has improved. We have more possibilities and opportunities, and people with disabilities use these options, opportunities more and more. Dear colleagues, I would wish you so that we together improve the quality of life for the people with disabilities. Thank you, and have a nice trip back home. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for the encouraging words. And I just would like to add, I would like to express my gratitude for our panelists, moderators, your work, your support. I would like to say thank you for the guests, thank you to the interpreters. For interpreting, maybe not about this topic. And the biggest and the greatest thank you is to Elin Selmiņa and her team for everything they've done. Thank you. And once more, all that leave to airport, buses arrive at 2 o'clock. At 1, you have the opportunity to grab a snack, and for those who will spend some time in Riga, have a nice time here, and have a good luck. Thank you.